the time to act is now. And hopefully the shit doesn't hit the fan. And hopefully you just had a really nice year of gardening. That's what I really hope. But it's better to be prepared. And one thing, one of the fringe benefits that comes from getting into gardening, particularly in a city where you might be in a community garden type scenario, is you get to know people who know stuff, and you get to know people who are resourceful. And that's what's really important, because at the end of it, all that matters is what you got in your head, the skills that you have, the things that you've learned, all your experiences, what you can do with your hands. Can you jump in and make shit happen? And what's in your heart? Are you a good person? Are you somebody that people want to help? Are you enjoyable to be around? Because when things get tough, we're all going to be questioning our relationships, and all these relationships that are somewhat vampiric and not beneficial. You got that friend who mooches off you for everything. If the shit hits the fan, he's the last guy you're going to be concerned about helping. But people who are resourceful and want to help and can help you with the kids and provide value, those are the people that are going to stick together and form groups that make things happen. And if you're one of these alienated people that is an asshole and people don't like to be around, better start changing your ways now, because the future isn't bright for people like that, I don't think.
This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, and we got a great show lined up for you today, my friend. So let's just jump right into it. Joining me on the line today is our good friend Curtis Stone, the Urban Farmer. Urban Farmer on YouTube is his channel. Links are going to be located in the description below. Curtis, man, thank you so much for joining us here today. I wanted to specifically get you on because you're a guy who's been prepping for what we're seeing now for years now. In fact, if things continue to escalate and get bad, as I imagine they will, and there's a run on the grocery store, or God forbid, a breakdown in the supply chain, you're still going to be able to put food on the table for your family. And so I wanted you to maybe provide the viewers with some tips and tricks on how they can now fast track their way to becoming self-sustainable as you are. But before we get into how people can grow their own food at home, maybe you can talk a little bit about this pandemic, and not really the virus itself, but the reaction to the pandemic by governments all over the world. How are you seeing this one play out when it comes to the global reaction to this global problem?
Well, yeah, there's a few things there I see. Yeah, I mean, let's just say that, let's assume the pandemic's real and everything the media and the government saying is real. Okay, you look at the numbers, well, they're not that terrifying. The flu is worse every year. But I don't want to downplay it, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is really all that bad. But even if it is, there's still so many other repercussions that nobody's really talking about. I mean, people like us are talking about it, but the mainstream is not at all. And I just mean even people on the street, because I talk to people all the time. I'll be out in my front yard garden. I always just talk to people when I go to stores. I'm a social guy. I like to talk to people and hear what they're thinking and kind of what's on their mind. I kind of get a sense of where society is moving that way. But there's three things that I think are like an absolute trifecta that could create a collapse that we've never seen before. Is one, there's the political element, where we see governments, every government in the world, kind of lock in step, bringing in new measures that, of course, take away our civil liberties, of course, bring in more heavy-handed things like punishments for not self-isolating. There's all kinds of sketchy financial stuff they're doing on the back end too, even here in Canada. So there's all this like scaling up of the political, bringing more power for them and less power for us. Then there's the economic, of course, which is, might cause the biggest fallout, where we've got governments of the world printing massive amounts of money. And of course, they don't print money. They just add digits in a ledger. But that could cause some kind of hyperinflation scenario, because if there's trillions of more dollars in circulation to buy less goods, well, just do the math. And we've seen that in history before. So that's significant. And then the third thing to me is the cultural aspect. The fact that we've already kind of lived in a society ever since the advent of the iPhone, and particularly social media, where everybody's already kind of self-isolating anyways. They're either like spending 8 hours a day on social media when they're at that boring dead-end job and they're just clicking and liking things. or they're on their phones every minute of the day when they're on the SkyTrain going to work or whatever it is. People are already very disconnected from one another. And now the culture is rewarding those to disconnect further. And maybe there's just reason for that. Let's just assume that there is. But we still have to go outside. We need sunshine and vitamin D to live, right? We have to be outside. We have to get exercise. We have to be doing things. And the sort of culture now is shifting with this self-isolating thing, is that the governments and maybe the mainstream media have given people the go ahead and sort of social plus points to virtue signal about self-isolating, but also rat on others who aren't. And you saw that article, I forget where it came out. They were talking about at the White Rock Pier, where a bunch of people are out on a beautiful sunny day in spring. You know, one of the first days in spring, people want to get outside. Mm-hmm. And people are sharing this article and hating on, calling these people COVIDiots and all this. So there's this new culture of informing on one another, just like we saw in East Germany or any of the Soviet fascist governments that have happened in the history. So this is the thing that's most terrifying to me. But the thing that nobody's really seeing is that if there's any disruption in the supply chain, and there could be, because there's many things that could lead to that, whether it's political things like closing borders, economic things where we have hyperinflation, also fear of getting food from other places, because who knows how far the media is going to push this fear machine. It seems to be working very well for them. So those are my concerns. And, you know, I never saw this coming as far as a pandemic that would be the thing that kind of pushes the new world order to the next level. But here we are.
Yeah. Well, you obviously saw something coming, and as you know, as you said, have been preparing for years. I believe for the last 12 years, you've been setting yourself up to be in a position to not have to rely on the government in tough times like these. So maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the things you've done over the past decade in order to get yourself into a position where, you know, you can just be off the grid and not have to rely on them.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of things there. And whether, before I tell you those things, which I'm happy to do, I want people to realize that they don't necessarily have to be in that position to see this through. Like, I do live, my property is not off grid, but we do have solar and we do have a battery system on our house. So if the grid goes down, we'll have power. So I'm not 100% off grid. Like, I don't capture my own rainwater, you know, but I do grow all the produce I eat almost year round. And you know what? For this pandemic, thank God we're going into summer. I got to say that, because if we were going into winter and this shit was happening, man, I wouldn't have been as prepared. But so, you know, we've stored a lot of food, which we've always done. And we grow a ton of food. So yeah, we're prepared in that, but what about people around me? So, I mean, one thing I've been doing is I've been letting my neighbors know that if they want me to come and rototill their yards for them, I'll do that for free. And I'll encourage them to start planting seeds, because I don't want to be in this alone. I don't want to be a lone wolf that's kind of hunkering down and hoping the hordes don't come and raid me. You know what I mean? Because that's, who knows how bad this could get. I hope to God it doesn't get that bad, because I got little kids and I don't want my kids to see terrible times like a movie like The Road or something like that, you know, post-apocalyptic. Hopefully we don't get there. Yeah. But, you know, people could do a lot still right now. I have to say, I go around, like, we're stocked, but I've been going around and buying stuff just because it's like, hey, why not still buy things if I can? If the store's closed tomorrow, we would be fine. But I go around and I'm looking, and there's still a lot of stuff on the shelves. I don't think we're anywhere near, we're not in a food chain disruption yet. There are things on little things like shitty canned goods, like all the conventional stuff that people would think to buy. Those are the things that are less, but there's still lots of stuff on the shelves. And one thing too that I'm very surprised to see, that I would encourage everybody here to get on, is go and buy seeds, because seeds could have more value than dollars very soon. And there's a lot of seeds on the shelves. I've been to all the garden centers here in Kelowna, the town I live in, are all still stocked. I'm seeing stuff move fast, and I'm talking to the people at the garden centers, and they're saying, yeah, we're selling 4 or 5 times more stuff than we did last year or the year before. So there's definitely people are buying stuff, which is good, but you can still go get stuff. And, you know, avoid Walmart, avoid the shitty places, avoid Walmart and Costco and all the conventional grocery stores that everybody else goes to. And you can still get stuff. Like I only buy organic stuff or grow my own stuff. And all the organic stores, it doesn't even look like there's any shortages at all. So there's still time to act. And that's the thing that people need to do is act. Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking that this is just going to blow over. And maybe it will. And I hope to God that it does. I would rather be wrong and the shit not hit the fan than be right and have the shit hit the fan. So
yeah, exactly. It's far better to be prepared. And I think seeds is a really, really great bit of advice there. You're right. That could very much lead to being almost a currency of the future. But, you know, it begs the question, when you got companies like Monsanto out there who have kind of made it their mission to control all organisms on life, are we able to get away from the GMO seed? And is it still possible to find these heirloom seeds out there and know that it's actually organic?
Oh yeah. You know what, Dan? As a guy who's been down every rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, I have to say that there's a lot of over-exaggerated fear with the whole Monsanto thing. Like, there's certainly reason to be concerned, and Monsanto, DuPont, Bayer, all those big food monopolies, which I think Bayer and Monsanto combined recently. It's not great, but there's so much heirloom seed out there. It's ridiculous. It's not difficult to buy non-GMO seed. And to be honest, you can't really buy GMO seed that easily. Like, garden seeds are not GMOs. GMO seeds are made for commodity agriculture, sugar beets, and things like that, where people are producing huge tens of thousands of hectares of. That's soybeans, stuff like that. Garden seeds that you buy from West Coast Seeds, you know, here in British Columbia, or William Dam Seeds in Ontario, you're not going to find GMOs there. I mean, it's possible that there might be some GMOs in there, but not really. So don't worry about that. There are lots of good seeds out there. And you know what? There's also a lot here in British Columbia where we live. There's actually, how many are there? I mean, I know just two off the top of my head. I have a local seed supplier here in Kelowna called Sunshine Farms. All heirloom seed. There's Salt Spring. Is it Salt Spring Seeds on Salt Spring Island, producing seeds? We got West Coast Seeds, which is a huge seed distributor. There's a lot of options for us, and I would say, you know, don't hesitate in that, because as long as you keep your seeds cool, dark, and dry, they'll last for years. So there's really no downside to going and buying more seed than you need. And because of that, actually, I do foresee a run on seeds, because, you know, I'm very connected to the farmer network around the world, and every farmer I know is buying 4 to 5 times more seed than they normally would, because farmers are generally pretty switched on to these things. So I think it's possible by, I don't know, I don't want to give times and dates, but there could be a run on seeds very soon. So I would encourage everybody to go and get a lot of seeds, because it's important. You know, you got to take responsibility for yourself. And if you can take responsibility for people around you too, all the better.
Now, what about some of these city dwellers who may be watching this today saying, okay, that's all fine and dandy. You got a nice chunk of property, but I live in a condo. I mean, how the heck am I going to grow food for my family? Are there ways that city dwellers right now who are maybe on quarantine or facing potential quarantine going to be able to do some of the things that you're doing?
Well, it depends how bad the quarantine gets. I mean, if the government enforces a lockdown and says nobody can leave their house for no reason, I mean, we're all kind of screwed. Like, I have 3 different farm sites that I manage. I'm actually in the middle of starting another farm. I got out of commercial farming 18 months ago, basically took an extended break. But with all this stuff happening, I went and leased another half acre. So the only property I own is the property I live on. And yes, I can grow a lot of food here. But maybe not. And it depends on how much, you know, I've always tried to take responsibility beyond myself and my family into my greater community. And so I feel a need to get back into farming. So I've got right now I'm farming almost an acre of land between 3 different places. So yes, people in condos can go and rent land from people. I mean, this is how I built my career as a farmer. I was in an apartment when I started farming. I was leasing out people's yards and building my farm that way. People can do that. The key is be proactive and offer value. So like, yeah, it's not hard to farm land you don't own. City dwellers can certainly do that. There's definitely a movement of that happening in Vancouver, and there has been for a long time. But again, yeah, it depends how totalitarian this whole thing gets. I mean, I know at least on the government's end, unless they blatantly want to start killing people, they're going to let farmers go to work, because it would be absolute societal suicide to not do that. So, you know, people in condos can go and find plots of land to manage. And that means they got to commute to that land to work the land, but it's possible. My whole book, The Urban Farmer, outlines how to do that. I built a career doing it, and people can do it just for a hobby or for sustenance as well.
That's a really, really good idea. In fact, it reminds me of an idea I came up with a few years ago that, I just kind of let it, not develop, but maybe somebody out there can put this together. But I think I maybe even told you about this a few years ago, where I had this idea that you could have an app, let's say, very similar to Uber, only instead of people who need a ride and people who have cars who are going to provide that ride, it's people who need land to grow food and people who have the land to grow the food, right? We call it Grover. And you would
Yeah,
actually facilitate the meeting up of somebody who needs land to grow food and somebody who's, hey, I got a backyard that I'm not using and I'll rent
yeah,
that to you. And maybe
totally.
you could do an exchange where you get some of the food and, um,
Yeah, that exists. There's multiple apps and there's multiple websites that do that. If you just search yard sharing, there's multiple apps that do that. There hasn't been necessarily one that's been like the ultimate one, like an Uber or something like that you're mentioning, but that does exist. You know, the problem is with all that is most people just don't give a shit. That's the problem. Most people don't even think about this stuff, and they're starting to now, I have to say. And and frankly, I'm a little annoyed with some of my kind of friends that have been friends with me before I became the urban farmer and all that, and I've been talking about this stuff for years. I am a little annoyed that as soon as the shit starts to hit the fan, my friends are like, "Hey, can you tell me how to make a garden?" Hey, and it's like, you guys, I've got 800 videos on YouTube on how to do it. Go figure it out. You know, um, but I mean, it's certainly too late to hope to get an app started to do that. But, you know, one thing I'm seeing in the farming community is that because restaurants are closing and there's all this fear and mandates for self-isolation, what we're seeing is the massive expansion of community supported agriculture. CSAs, those are vegetable box programs. They're basically like buying a share, like a stock in a farm, and then you get a dividend in the amount in produce every week. And so I've seen an explosion of this. I did a YouTube video of a few weeks ago where I basically said to farmers, guys, it's time to start a CSA now. Even though when times were good, it wasn't the greatest market stream. Like a farmer like myself, who's a small farmer, can make way more money selling to high-end restaurants and going kind of chasing the highest dollar. But right now, there's really good money in starting CSAs because people who value food security, and there's a lot of people out there, it's certainly not the masses, but there's a lot of people out there that do and are be willing to put money up front to get access to vegetables from a farm every week, guaranteeing that food supply. So, I mean, that's one thing. That's a message for farmers if they haven't thought of that already. That's going to be huge. But that's something that people can do even in the cities is find your local growers who are offering CSAs and sign up now. Like
yeah.
some CSAs allow week by week transactions, which is fine. Um, but the traditional type of CSA is you pay up front. So you might pay 500 or 800 bucks to guarantee your spot and guarantee a box each week. I would do that. If I wasn't as prepared as I am here with my own food supply, that's one thing. If I was in a city, I'd be doing. I'd be going, where's the closest farm I can sign up so I can guarantee? Because the grocery stores, Who knows? I don't want to spread fear. I don't want to make people think that it's all gonna happen. I don't know. I hope that none of this does happen, but I'm seeing the writing on the wall, and it seems very possible that we could see food shortages. But again, thank God we're going into summer in North America, and the way I see it is, let this be a lesson, because you've been following the New World Order and all these cronies for a long time, and the one thing I've noticed with the way they operate on sort of a grand scheme level is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's inch by inch that and these guys play a long game. So I could see it potentially going where they ramp this up and it looks like the shit is really going to hit the fan. And then, oh, all of a sudden it's okay. Let that be a warning and never get caught off guard again, because it will come back. This whole plan has been set out for a very long time, and all the pieces are in place. But I really hope it doesn't happen, because what's the worst case scenario? If you go out and start a garden, dig up your yard, maybe you start a farm somewhere else. What's the worst case scenario? You learned a bunch of skills about farming, and you're growing your own good organic food that's going to only better your health. It's going to connect you to a whole new community of people that you never knew existed. I mean, I don't see any downside. So if people are fearful of that, and I think it's important to not be fearful, but just think about it rationally, is act, because there's no downside. There's only upside.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's again why I wanted to have you on today, because that's the importance of your channel. Really, is people are going to start flooding to this kind of information. Hopefully
It's crazy,
tonight, right? They're already starting to come, right? I'm sure you're getting a lot of people asking you questions these days. Hey, how do I do this?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's not too late out there, folks. As Curtis said, this very well may be a multi-phase agenda here that's going to carry out over possibly a number of years, and possibly a number of phases, with mutations coming back. And when they pushed back on this digital dollar, and they pushed back on the stimulus package that had all this underlining things, well, when the second wave comes, they'll be able to say, well, now we need these things, right? So as you said, these things are happening incrementally. It's a slow march towards all out tyrannical martial law, essentially. And do you see this getting worse in the coming couple of weeks, and maybe even month, before it gets better? I mean, it's tough to say. You don't have a crystal ball, but obviously the economic ramifications are going to be huge. What do you foresee, let's say in a month from now, of how Vancouver and Canada and the world's going to be doing?
Well, I do watch the news cycle every day. Of course, I watch lots of alternative media, such as yourself. I watch in the alternative media. I watch a wide spectrum of things too. Like I watch Chris Martenson to Peak Prosperity. He's kind of a little bit more on the left politically. He also really buys into the narrative of the pandemic itself, and he thinks that's the biggest black swan. But I also pay attention to, like I said, guys like yourself. What's David Icke saying and all this stuff? I listen to lots of alternative media that way. But I do read all the mainstream headlines, because I like to see. I find they operate in a certain way that I've noticed, is that they like to plant seeds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And in an era where digital information allows you to gather really good algorithmic data on what people like and don't like, they use it to their advantage, because they can seed things and then see how people react to it, and then they can seed more of it. So in those headlines, I'm seeing that this is going to get worse for a while. We're going to see more stringent measures coming from government. I don't think we'll see the economic fallout for a little while, because there is surplus. And also, when you know about how money works, is that central banks create bonds essentially, and then those go as permissions for big banks to create money. At least that's how it works in Canada. We don't have, our central bank doesn't print money like the US Federal Reserve does. Our Bank of Canada issues bonds, and then they sell them to the commercial banks, the main six, and then they issue currency. So, but it's the same thing. It's all funny money that's just promised to pay and belief in that money. So they're ramping up all this inflationary measures right now, which we won't see the effects of for a couple months, because that money's got to hit the stock market. Then you're going to see a gravy train on the stock market. People are surging, we're bouncing back, all this. And then once that money hits the streets to go invest in businesses and things like this, and then there's all of a sudden this massive influx of capital on the streets, that's where I think we could see a hyperinflation scenario. But I think we're going to see, Mike Maloney has been saying this for a long time, and I think he's been quite correct, is we're going to see this deflationary cycle. I think we're kind of in it now because the US dollar is surging. It's the highest it's been in a long time. And we're going to have this kind of gravy train a little bit on the stock market, but then it could be 6 months down the road where things get gnarly. So the way I see it is, let's assume that it's all going to be good for now. Make haste while the sun shines. Get crops in the ground. Grow storage crops. Set yourself up as much as you can to prepare to think about what happens if the stores close tomorrow. What happens if the banks close? What are you going to do? Because if that happens going into winter, man, that could be gnarly. I really, really hope it doesn't. I hope I'm wrong on all this, because I'll gladly come out and say, hey, maybe I was wrong. But I don't know if I will be, because I think all these things take time, and these guys play a long game. But I think in the coming months, we're going to see just more stringent measures from the government, kind of, where you're going to have some kind of ID or some kind of documentation to prove that you have a right to be out doing something. Maybe they'll have this quota system where everybody's only allowed once a week or something. Who knows? And I don't know, what's the solution for that? It's just to prepare. But yeah, I'm not hopeful that it's going to get better. However, I follow it seems like there's some really interesting stuff going on the top, and I'm hopeful that there's some good people up top changing things, but I'm also realistic in what I see is an absolute totalitarian rollout happening right in front of our eyes, and people are begging for it. So to me, that's sign to get ready and, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah, well said. And like you said, the worst thing that can happen of it is that, well, you have some healthy, good food now for yourself. So it's really a win-win. So for anybody who's maybe just hearing about you now and they're thinking, yeah, I want to subscribe and learn from you. You got 800 videos on how to grow food. Where's the best place for them to go? What's the channel and any other links you want to give out?
Yeah. I mean, all my I have lots of free content on YouTube. Like you said, around 800 videos. Just search the Urban Farmer Curtis Stone on YouTube. I'll easily find me. I also have a membership site called FromTheField.tv, and that's actually where I put the majority of my, call it, super detailed and long form content, because as you know, sometimes those things don't track so well on social media or YouTube, especially in the era of censorship that we're in. If you're not making clickbaity type stuff that has a catchy thumbnail and all that, that's where I put stuff that's highly detailed. So I've traveled around the world interviewing farmers and really digging into their operations. So that's where I put that kind of content. I'm developing a new farm right now as we speak. And so I'm putting all that long form content up on that site, FromTheField.tv, as well. And, basically those two things, people will find enough of me. And, one thing I want to say to that is, if you think you want to start getting into gardening, just act. Don't get too hung up on all the little details. Should I do things this way? Should I do things that way? Get some basics and just get started, because we're going into the growing season now. We're finally getting some warmer weather here in Canada, and the time to act is now. And hopefully the shit doesn't hit the fan, and hopefully you just had a really nice year of gardening. That's what I really hope. But it's better to be prepared. And one of the fringe benefits that comes from getting into gardening, particularly in a city where you might be in a community garden type scenario, is you get to know people who know stuff, and you get to know people who are resourceful. And that's what's really important, because at the end of it, all that matters is what you got in your head, the skills that you have, the things that you've learned, all your experiences, what you can do with your hands. Can you jump in and make shit happen? And what's in your heart? Are you a good person? Are you somebody that people want to help? Are you enjoyable to be around? Because when things get tough, we're all going to be questioning our relationships, and all these relationships that are somewhat vampiric and not beneficial. You got that friend who mooches off you for everything. If the shit hits the fan, he's the last guy you're going to be concerned about helping. But people who are resourceful and want to help and can help you with the kids and provide value, those are the people that are going to stick together and form groups that make things happen. And if you're one of these alienated people that is an asshole and people don't like to be around, better start changing your ways now, because the future isn't bright for people like that, I don't think.
Yeah, very, very good point. I think community moving forward is absolutely going to be key to our survival. Helping one another, as you said, on the local level is absolutely crucial moving forward. Essentially, just decentralization in a
Yes.
nutshell, right?
That, and hopefully that's what comes out of this. You know, that would be a really nice thing if people took this as a lesson and realized how important it is to have community and resources and resourceful people around you, but also understanding that you have to provide value to access those resources. If that comes out of this, that could be a really good thing, you know, because I think the world is going to look like the Hunger Games. Because anybody's seen that movie, in my opinion, that movie was public notice, and we're moving towards there very quickly. And so if we don't work together, then these elites are going to keep steamrolling us, and that's the way that they want it. They want us divided. That's how this social isolation thing fits into it. Is they want us divided in our own little cubby holes, being paranoid about one another, who's sick and who isn't, and that's not a good way to be. It just isn't. You want to know your neighbors and be connected and help people.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent advice. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but I want
Probably,
to
yeah.
leave it at that. We'll let people know. Let's focus on community here, and not just that, guys. Be a good person, as Curtis
Yeah.
said. You know, when times are tough, you're gonna find out who your real friends are, and the fruits of your labor will begin to show in times and when times get tough. So make sure you're a good person moving forward. Again, some really great advice. So once again, man, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We're going to have links to your channel in the description below. I strongly encourage people to subscribe, and you take care, man. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks for having me.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.